Well, hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graven, and our guest today is Dr. Noor Ali. She is a doctor and a surgeon. She's doing work these days as a health insurance advisor here in the US. She describes herself as a passionate and strong willed mother, wife, doctor, researcher, and entrepreneur. And she is a champion of women in science who want it all. So I guess we'll get a chance to learn more about what that means and more about her. But Noor, first off, thank you for being here today. How are you?
Yes, wonderful, Mark. Thank you so much for the opportunity and the honor to be on your show. I hope we can have a fun episode and, offer some a good show for your listeners today.
Yeah, well, I'm sure this is going to be fun and informative. Dr. Noor's website, by the way, is drnoorhealth.com, and we'll make sure that that's in the show notes. So, Noor, as we ask everybody here on the show, I know this question is not a surprise. What is, looking at your work and your career, what has been your favorite mistake?
Yes. So my favorite mistake has been, I went to medical school abroad in my native country, Bangladesh. And when I came back to the States for work, I did not know how to write a resume. So my favorite mistake has been not knowing how to write a resume and really not getting any opportunities for appropriate work in my field.
So tell us more about that. I mean, what sort of, I mean, I'm guessing you had difficulty finding a position. How did you learn that was connected to your resume? What sort of mistakes were you making there?
Yeah. So when I came back to the States after my training abroad, my medical training in internal medicine and general surgery, there's a process for foreign medical practitioners to go through a licensing exam and process in order for us to practice in the States. So as I was looking for work as a qualified licensed international physician, I didn't know how to craft a resume that would, you speak to my skills at that level. So I was really, not only was I not getting any appropriate work, the only responses I was getting was for like as a lawnmower and things like that. So when I, for one of them, I recall telling them like, have you even like, taken a look at my resume? I'm a licensed physician and surgeon. What makes you think I'm qualified to mow lawns? And I suppose I am, but is there anything else that you have for me? Questions of that sort. So really, I just didn't understand the system, didn't understand what was required, and I was just not getting any work.
Yeah. Did you at some point then get some coaching and some feedback that got your resume pointed in a better direction?
Not when it not really actually not I still didn't understand what I had to do or what I was missing. Now looking back years later, understanding the system, the ATS system, how it's screened, the process flow, knowing all of that would have probably been a lot better at that time. But when I was going through it, I didn't even know enough what knowledge to seek out or who to go for help or mentorship to change my situation. And as a result, I ended up doing work that I worked at a Subway making sandwiches because I was literally, Mark, not getting any work. I even tried to work as a nurse, as a nursing position, even though I was overqualified for that. And even then I wasn't allowed work. That's how awful it was. And I just didn't know what to do about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, clearly you figured things out. Tell us a little bit more about that journey. I mean, did you become an entrepreneur because of those difficulties finding something that was a fit?
Yeah, I suppose so. So one of my main reasons for reaching out to you, and we had a little call where I was kind of struggling to find out what would be a good topic, and I realized that experience of not being quite qualified or overqualified for whatever positions I was getting and not being able to translate that properly on paper, I felt a much greater sense of self-worth than I was able to convey on that one sheet of paper. So I knew that I was capable of a lot more and I could do a lot more, but I had no one else to validate that. And I believe those rejections or that one blow after the other ultimately led me to this path of entrepreneurship where I was like, well, screw it. If no one else is going to acknowledge the value that I'm giving myself here, well, let me take advantage, let me take charge of that, and let me carve my own path. So that mistake of not knowing how to write a resume and being overqualified for almost everything has led me to the entrepreneurship journey that I am on today.
Yeah. So, can you maybe explain a little bit for the audience? I think people might not realize, and I don't have a real deep understanding of this, even though I've been
Sure.
around healthcare myself for 15 years. When somebody like yourself has this training and experience in another country, what happens then here coming to the U.S.? It seems like some of that talent maybe goes to waste. There's not reciprocity in the licensing
Sure.
across borders. Is that right?
Sure. So the medical education is recognized if you go through like an equivalency program where you submit your transcript and your grades, and they match that with, the courses and the grades and the system here. And ultimately, you get an equivalency certificate, which states that yes, your education is acknowledged, it's accredited. Your degree in X country is equal to an MD, a Doctor of Medicine degree here. However, to practice medicine, you still have to pass the licensing exams. And the licensing exams are a series of exams that are administered to United States students here, medical students here, where they take it in as they go through med school. Now, I've taken my version of my licensing exams where I studied medicine, and I was way past that, and I was a practicing physician and surgeon. So for me to have to, it's not necessarily starting from square one because I'm not going back to school, but the first step of the licensing exam is assessing really basic medical sciences, which are things that I had learned 6-7 years prior, when I was at that time. So there's a big disconnect with foreign physicians being active, licensed practicing practitioners and having to take exams and do well. They're very competitive. So not just take it and pass it, you have to do very, very well. Assessing basic sciences, which is really like, I was like 18 years old when I, studied that material. So I really struggled, and it was a big challenge, not only coming to terms with, losing that credibility and having to re-identify myself, but also feeling this, my ego working against my other ego, knowing that, well, I'm a licensed physician, but yet I can't practice because I don't remember this one enzyme in the Krebs cycle, which I studied like 7 years ago.
I don't remember ever grilling my doctor on their knowledge of the Krebs cycle. It seems like that's
Thank
not the
you.
most
Thank you.
relevant
I
thing.
know.
It's
Right.
not the most relevant thing to the practical practice
Yes, and
of
that's
medicine.
it. Just the mindset is just so different. When you're practicing medicine, you're thinking treatment and management and the patient centric care who's in front of you. But when you're in medical school, you're memorizing steps and enzymes and numbers, and it's a lot of rote memorization. So that disconnect really, to speak on behalf of all foreign medical graduates who are trying to make a living and trying to get established in the United States, it's everything. It's the crux of the struggle for us.
Yeah. Now, is that something you still might pursue, or you found other professional pathways that you think will be fulfilling here?
Mark, I don't think I have a good answer for that. Deep in my heart, I still I feel like that's my calling and that's what I was born to do. But I've taken a different turn, and I'm very happy with where I am in my life right now. And I don't know if I can necessarily handle or juggle both, or even want to. So I don't really know. I'd love to, but I don't know if that's practical or feasible for me at this stage.
Okay, well, sure. So, how did I'd be curious to learn more? Let's talk about the work you do related to health insurance, because that is, for listeners outside the U.S., I know it's hard to get your head around the U.S. health system sometimes and what has to be navigated or the mistakes that people might make, and we can explore that here. But how did you move into that type of work? Like, are there certain types of people that you help navigate the health insurance market?
Yeah, definitely. So I specialize in working with entrepreneurs and small business owners, really anyone who has to purchase or figure out their health insurance on their own. I just really help kind of draw out their options and figure out what's going to be best for them. My specialization in health insurance is medically underwritten policies, which really puts back into the equation what Obamacare took out with the Affordable Care Act in 2008. So essentially, the younger and healthier you are, the lower risk you are to a health insurance company, and you can get better rates and better coverage. So this is significant for small business owners in the growth phase who are growing, because having a health insurance premium that's tied solely to your income can be quite detrimental in the long run, especially if you're doing well. You can end up having health insurance premiums that are greater than your home mortgages, and people don't always love that, right? And they sometimes end up foregoing it altogether. So what I'd like to come do is present a solution for that population that say, hey, there's other things out there, you probably just don't know about it. Let me help you kind of draw those options out and see what we can do.
So, and even though I'm an entrepreneur, I have the benefit of getting health insurance through my wife, who has a more traditional corporate
Yes.
role. So
Yes.
this is not something I've personally had to navigate. So I am really curious. Maybe you can elaborate on the situation where, let's say, somebody's really starting off. They're growing a business. They're not paying themselves yet a salary.
Mm-hmm.
Their income is low, and then let's
Mm-hmm.
say a year or two later, the business starts really taking off. Is that then the trap that you were describing if they have something that's tied to a percentage of income?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And there's two, and depending on the situation, I'll advise accordingly. You want to take advantage of the situation you're in, and knowing is really half the battle. What I find mostly is they just don't know their options. They don't know what to do. And because it's so confusing, or either they just don't understand it, they just end up saying, well, whatever, I'd rather just not even have health insurance, which is sad to me. Or I see a lot of entrepreneurs who are afraid to leave their corporate jobs and pursue their dreams and passions because they're afraid of losing the benefits. And I'm in a similar boat like you, Mark. I'm with under my husband's corporate plan, and we're very fortunate. He works for a very large corporation, and we get amazing benefits. But if we didn't, this is something that I'd have to figure out for myself. So here's a little advice for your listeners. If you're an entrepreneur and you are making, let's say, less than $35,000 a year, take advantage of the Obamacare or healthcare.gov tax credits and subsidies, because the government will help you. They'll pay a portion of your premium because you have a lower income. However, as soon as you cross that mark, as soon as you cross that 35,000 mark and you're losing that subsidy, you are going to get penalized not only in back premiums. The IRS will come back and take those premiums from you, and your premiums are going to shoot up. So that's a time to pull out of the healthcare market and possibly look at private plans to see if that might serve you and your business better.
Mm-hmm. And so then you also help people navigate that. Does that
Yes.
apply to individuals, or let's say if it's a small company that's getting to the point where they do want to offer a health insurance plan to their employees? Do you also help people navigate that?
Yep, absolutely. I do. Individuals, families, and small businesses, typically under 10, because then after 10 and then 50, that every mark, the laws change and their options change. So I like to work with under 10, and we can offer a lot of flexibility. And this is something else that a lot of small business owners don't know. If you're growing, but you can't necessarily, you want to reward your team that helped you grow, but you can't necessarily afford to pay for health insurance for their whole family, right? What you can do is just connect them to a resource like me and say, hey, I can't give you health insurance, but please talk to her. Maybe you can figure out a solution for yourself. Maybe I can contribute 25% of your premiums, or offer you a $200 a month stipend or credit, and you can figure out what policy works for you. So those are some flexible options that I like to offer that a lot of small business owners don't consider.
Mm-hmm. And then I saw on your website, there's this big question of, okay, well, what does this cost? So maybe you can explain a little bit that people who are looking for that advice don't have to pay, they don't pay you directly.
No, not at all. They don't pay anything at all. In fact, if you are even on a corporate plan and you just want to know, like, is this really my best option, or is there a private plan that's better out there? I really encourage anyone and everyone to just have a conversation with me. Number one, it costs absolutely nothing. It's free. I consider myself very well versed in the insurance industry. We have laws that change every week, guys, and health insurance is governed by state, not by federal. So each state again has their own laws and bylaws. So I stay up to date and current on all that, just so if you are just curious to know what your options are, I highly encourage a conversation with me. It doesn't cost a thing. And if I'm able to tell you that there's something out there that's better than what you have right now, all you'd pay for is really the benefits you sign up for.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a parallel when you talk about the laws changing and the market changing all the time. I've heard that anymore a physician can't possibly keep up with all of the new research and medical knowledge that's coming out. You certainly shouldn't be expected to memorize all of that. It sounds like the health insurance market is just as challenging then.
It really is. I thought I would be getting away from a world of studying when I went from medicine to insurance, but nope, it's just as much, if not more. So constantly changing laws, and it's different. It's a business and then finance world, which is quite different from the medical world, but just as much upkeep in terms of continuing professional and medical education.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other common mistakes that come to mind that individuals or small companies make when it comes shopping for insurance or choosing an insurance plan? What are some of the most frequent things that you try to help people avoid?
Yeah, I would say for young, healthy individuals, one of the biggest mistakes that I see is choosing for a high deductible, low premium plan. I think that something like that may work for, let's say, home or auto insurance, where you're not really expecting to use your insurance, but you have to have it. So you just want to pay the least out of pocket. But when it comes to health insurance, that's really not the right way to think, especially if you're young and healthy. So, what that means, if you're a young individual on a low premium, high deductible plan, you're paying your premiums every month. And then, God forbid, in the very unlikely situation that you fall ill or something happens, you then have a very high deductible to meet. And high deductible, we say, let's say $10,000. So not only did we pay the insurance company our premiums every month, now that we have to actually use our insurance for something big, you again, as the individual, is coming out of pocket. So that's something I like to educate on, especially for young professionals. Don't go for the high deductible. You want to choose a little to nothing, no deductible.
Yeah. Because somebody who's young might think there's low risk, but I imagine if you're young, we all know people who have been young who have either unfortunately had a major accident or a serious illness, and those then become catastrophically expensive. So it seems like it might be low percentage of something going wrong. I'm being an engineer and a statistician here. I'm thinking like, well, the
Yes.
expected value
Yeah.
of something bad happening. Yeah, that's
But
something people
that's
probably don't take into account well enough.
yes. Well, it's actually the basis of this advice is actually that statistic that there is quite actually a low chance that something will go wrong. But if and in that event, when something goes wrong, you want to make sure that your insurance company is actually stepping up first because of all the premiums you've made, you know?
Yeah. So I'd like to explore a little bit. Well, for one, for background, I should have asked you up front, what was your specialty as a physician and surgeon?
Sure. So when we in developing third world countries like Bangladesh, where we have a very high population and very, very low resources, we are trained in absolutely everything. So my training is internal medicine, general surgery, and OBGYN. And my special interest areas are actually women's reproductive medicine. So most of my experience that's outside of my formal training is actually in gynecology and obstetrics.
Mm-hmm. And there are, so back in Bangladesh, have there been great strides in recent years when it comes to measures like infant mortality or maternal mortality,
Yes,
maternal
Bangladesh. Thank you
health?
so much for asking. Yes, I'm so proud of this actually because Bangladesh happens to be one of the top countries with the greatest improvements in public health. And infant mortality and maternal mortality are the two biggest markers that demonstrate or that illustrate a state of a country's public health status.
Okay, well, that's great to hear. And
Yes.
we still have, you could tell us more about this if you like, still great strides to be made here in the United States when people take a look at the well-known figure that healthcare in the United States is the world's most expensive. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean we have the world's best outcomes. And unfortunately, that includes some of those same core measures around infant mortality, prenatal care, maternal health
Yeah,
problems,
maternal and
or
child health care.
death.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. And actually, there's more and more. I know quite a few journalists working on this. Elizabeth Rosenthal, a Harvard grad, a Harvard medical doctor, who writes a lot about this. That when we keep saying, "Well, healthcare system is broken," it's broken. Well, what does that really mean? How did it get this way? So she writes a series that's good that goes really in depth into it and compares other countries' healthcare systems and cost to try to identify, well, what's the problem? What's the grassroots problem? And what can we do to fix it?
Yeah, yeah. I've read her work. She's really good, and there's
Yeah,
also the challenge. Looking at the United States, there are disparities across different groups within the United States. So there's
absolutely.
still a long way to go. A lot of room for improvement, and
Absolutely.
providing people access to care in different ways is, of course, a big part of that
Yes,
equation.
yes, absolutely, Mark.
So, in part of your bio and the way you describe yourself, I think, there's two parts of this we can explore here before wrapping up. One is being a champion of women in science.
Hmm.
And then the part of that sentence, a champion of women who want it all. So maybe, first off, can you speak to, the importance of being a champion for women who are interested in science or pursuing this at different ages?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the category of pursuing science as an educational trajectory puts you on a different level, because when you're with peers in a scientific background, there's an edge of competitiveness. You're already bucketed into a higher intelligence group, and I think those factors automatically shape not just perspective of how you view life, how you view challenges, how you try to achieve success, what success means to you. So I think that just being a woman, being a woman in science, those are just really core layers of identity that shape me for who I am. And I know that other women in science, when they read that, they know exactly what I'm talking about, like having that background, what that means. Yeah.
So it sounds like you're saying that even if science is not the end point in terms of career,
Yeah.
that the education provides a lot of benefits that carry over into other careers or other aspects of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it provides an advantage, a great advantage. Having a background, a scientific background, I found that, because of my medical background and having this extensive clinical experience, although I'm not utilizing it on a day-to-day basis for my business right now, it makes so many things easier for me. I don't have to think twice. I don't have to Google something because I automatically know. I was like, well, I went to med school. I don't have to review this. I know how to do this. I know what medication this is. So having that background and a foundation educationally, I think really is empowering.
Yeah. So then the other part of that sentence, women who want it all, or women in science who
Yes.
want it all, what are your thoughts on that? Or some people, I mean, can't speak to this really as a man, but I hear
Sure.
conversations of sometimes there's debate around can you really have it all as a woman? Is a mistake to want it all? That's not me saying that, but just posing
Sure,
the
sure.
question. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and that's a great point, and I think that portion of how I describe myself didn't really come about until last year when I became a mother. I had a son, and that's when the all came into play. Really understanding that being, motherhood as a value, family as a value, in addition to education and career as a value. That's what I mean by all. Being able to be a mother and serve my family, make sure they're all taken care of and they're happy, as well as me feeling fulfilled in my career because I've achieved my milestones and what I define to be a success. So I'm grateful to you, Mark, for pointing out that statement, because there's so much in those words. A woman in science, a woman who wants it all. There's so much depth to it. And I feel like if you're a woman or a mom in science who craves it all, wants it all, has it all, you know exactly what I mean and what I'm talking about and the challenges that come with it.
Yeah. And I think there's still a lot of things to be sorted out in society in terms of kind of old workplace rules or habits or guidelines that were developed for a male workforce.
Sure.
Like a case in point, my home state of Michigan. This is outside the realm of science a little bit, but there was a woman in the Michigan State Legislature who had a child, and there are absolutely no guidelines for her to take maternity leave.
Oh,
There are
wow.
no
Okay.
guidelines for her to be able to vote or participate remotely, and I think it just goes to show that we still have a lot of things to sort out to give women I don't know if opportunity is the right word, and I almost said accommodation, that might be a mistake, but to provide support and to make
Sure.
sure that we're not putting barriers in the way of women pursuing careers, whether that's science or public
Right.
service and government.
Right, exactly. I agree. There's a lot to do. And a lot of it is not just, it might involve undoing, undoing mindset and mentality, as well as undoing infrastructure. Let's turn the storage room into a breastfeeding room for someone who might need privacy if they have a little one at home.
And I think, one of the this might be obvious, but I think organizations are still figuring this out, of making sure women's voices are involved in decisions and policies, because otherwise, I'll be the first to admit I would have blind spots to
Yeah,
certain
yeah.
issues, and I
You're
think
right.
that's
And I don't think we should blame organizations or point fingers or be upset or angry because, like you said, we're all still figuring it out. And I think a good place to start, let's say an organization has just male leadership and they understand the pressure and the need, and they want to make a change, but they just don't know how. I would say start at your office, start at who your employees are, and just ask, hey, what can we do to support you better? Do you need a private space for pumping, or can we, what resources can we give you to help you be a better mother? What, have you felt unsupported at meetings, or things like that? If you don't know where to start, just look around you and ask specifically the employee that you're trying to serve, instead of maybe trying to copy another company, and then the female at your workplace is still disgruntled because you haven't served her needs. So I would say that's a good place to start.
well, that sounds like really good advice. And as someone who gives advice in the realm of health insurance, Noor, thank you for sharing your different thoughts and experiences and perspectives with us. So again, our guest today has been Dr. Noor Ali. You can find her website, drnoorhealth.com, and there will be links in the show notes. And really want to thank you for taking time to be here as a guest today. Really, really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much, Mark. It was such an honor. I had a wonderful conversation and I appreciate your time as well. Thank you so much.
Okay.